budget process, and Ross Collins is going to come up and talk about marijuana policy and other key priorities for this year. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention that we had 97 NHLA endorsed candidates get elected in the government. We had 2 Senate candidates. And 97 House candidates have been elected, so that's 99.
That's the most ever.
This is the most we've ever had.
Endorsed.
Right? Every once in a while I watch the 101 Regency from New Hampshire video, and the NHLA is out there bragging about how they got 17 elected reps in the House, right?
So how are we doing it?
We didn't have the huge red wave that everybody was expecting, but I think, as far as Liberty goes, it's looking pretty good for New Hampshire. We've got a couple of NHLA events coming up, okay? So the 19th of November, we're going to have a bill review training at 3 p.m. at Manchester. So that's going to be a training if you want to review bills for the NHLA. That's going to put those bills on the gold standard. And we encourage you to come to that if you want to get involved in the process. Everyone else, the legislators. 28th of November, we're going to have a fundraiser at Vine 32 in Bedford. So this fundraiser is important because we're going to have special elections and stuff. We spent a lot of money on our endorsed candidates for this general election and primary election before that. The tickets are going to be $150 per person, and there's going to be a raffle for 3 nights at the Independence Inn. Okay, so that's going to be 6 p.m. at Vine 32 in Bedford. All right, December 10th, we're going to have another bill review training. This is going to be in Lee, New Hampshire at 1 p.m. It's going to be at a NHLA member's house, so we'll get that out to you in the newsletter.
It's on the calendar.
Already.
It's on the NHLA calendar.
It's on the NHLA calendar. All right. And then January 7th, 1 p.m. at Murphy's in Manchester, we're going to have a bill review session. All right, this is different than the training. We're actually going to get together and review bills for the gold standard. Okay? All right. So I'm going to have Dan McGuire take the mic here, and he's going to go over the budget process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome. Congratulations to all of you who were elected. You few, I guess. All right, so I was asked to talk about the budget. So I'll give you kind of an overview of what it is and how we create one. We start with the amount we spend is somewhere between $13 and $14 billion for a biennium. And another way to think about that, to bring it down to earth a little bit, that's $100 a week for every man, woman, and child in New Hampshire. All right? Or for a family of 4, it's $20,000 a year. Okay? It's a lot of money. All right? And to some extent, the amount we spend is a drain on our liberty, right? Because it's money that we can't spend on our own. This is money that's extracted from us, right? So the smaller the better. Okay. So the nice thing, so we have a biennium which starts in July. So the year we're in now, right now, is fiscal year 2023. The budget we will be writing in, starting in January, is for fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025. It will take effect in July 1st of 2023. Right? That's the way it works. The nice thing about New Hampshire, compared to many states, especially those that have income taxes, is that we have a relatively stable revenue structure. All right? So our revenues are pretty well known and pretty constant year to year to year, and they're predictable. That's why, part of the reason was Norm Major was very sharp, but part of the reason is our structure made it easy on it because the way that our taxes are organized, first of all, all, we have a lot of small taxes, right? So we have a communication tax and a real estate transfer tax and the interest and dividends tax, which hopefully is going away. And we have a number of tobacco tax, etc. So we have a lot of different taxes. And so in any given year, the advantage there is maybe one's not doing quite so well, maybe another one is doing better than expected, so it averages out, right? And the other thing is on our business taxes, we have a two-tax structure. It's not strictly just a profits tax, right? We have a profits tax, and we also have another tax called the Business Enterprise Tax. BET is the acronym, and it's effectively a payroll tax, all right? A very tiny one, less than 1%. But we take from a business whichever one of the two is higher. So business calculates what they would owe under BPT, what they would owe under BET, and whichever one is higher, that's what they pay. And the idea is, if you have businesses that are low profit margin, like think about a grocery store or a Walmart or something like that, they're going to pay BET. But if you have something like a software developer, which is a high profit margin, they're going to pay BPT, right? And so overall, it tends to smooth out our tax revenue. Okay? So we hope that this will be very predictable. That's our goal. All right. I was told to talk for roughly, I'm expecting about 20 minutes plus 10 minutes of questions, something like that. If I say something that you think you don't understand or you think it's wrong, you can ask a question right away. If you want to just expand the discussion or go into more depth or ask something new, please save to the end, okay? All right, let's go. All right, so the budget itself is contained in two bills, House Bill 1 and House Bill 2. House Bill 1 is like a giant spreadsheet. It's the size of a telephone book. And it's got the numbers of how much each little department is going to be spending, all right? And it breaks it up, not just, how much on salaries, how much on benefits, how much on this, that, and the other thing, okay? Equipment, things like that. House Bill 2 are the laws that support House Bill 1. Because sometimes we might decide we have a program that used to spend so much, and in law, we're required to spend so much. And this year, because we don't have enough or whatever, we decide to spend less. So we have to change the law that tells us to spend X. So we say, notwithstanding, section X, Y, Z of the law, we are going to spend instead for this biennium, we're going to spend this. And there's some laws like that are, more honored in the breach than in the execution. There's some laws that tell us we're going to spend on anti-alcoholism programs, right? That a certain fraction of the money that comes from the liquor department is going to go to anti-alcoholism programs. And I think we have never, in the 25 years or that such a law has been in place, we've never spent that much, right? With what the formula says. So a constant thing in House Bill 2 is, notwithstanding this formula, we're going to spend, that. So that happens all the time. And so as a legislator, you should know that anytime you put anything in law about spending a certain amount, that's only sort of a suggestion, right? Because the finance committees can come along and say, because they're last, right? House Bill 1 and House Bill 2 always take effect after anything else passed in that session, so that they can be the one that's in charge, right? And so anything that's in law that says spend this, spend that, is people who write the budget can easily overwrite it, because the budget has to be balanced, right? So we have to know what we're spending and what we're not, and so on. And I think that's correct, because the people who put something in law 20 years ago to spend a certain amount of money Well, they didn't know how much money we have to spend. They didn't know what our priorities are. So those are things that we today have to make those decisions. Okay, so the way the budget is created is in phases. Right now we're in a phase, well, we just finished the agency phase. So the agency phase is all the different agencies, DOT, Department of Education, HHS, etc. They put in their wish list, right? They say, okay, well, last year we spent this, but this year we'd like to, the next 2 years, we'd like to spend something else, right? And generally speaking, when you add up all those numbers, it comes to a giant increase. That's given to the governor, and the governor has essentially from middle of October until middle of February to work on his version of the budget. So the governor has a budget assistant, and that person is in charge of assembling all these agency requests, making decisions, and so on. And so a big thing the governor has to do is decide on how much revenue we're going to get, right? Because our budget has to be balanced. So we need to know how much money is coming in, so therefore we can spend a lot. And traditionally, the governor's estimate of revenue has been on the rosy side. Doesn't matter who the governor is, right? But it's generally been higher than what our Ways and Means Committee, who does that same job, what they think. And so therefore, the governor doesn't tend to make super hard choices in their budget, right? They make some choices, certainly they make choices and so on. But in any case, the governor creates the budget, and he creates it in a form of House Bill 1 and House Bill 2, right? So the same thing. So we have a giant set of numbers and the laws that support it, okay? And often the governor will have certain spending priorities, maybe new programs that they, they like or whatever, that will be part of it. The governor will give a big speech to the legislature, here's my budget, how great it is, etc. And then that will get introduced as House Bill 1 and House Bill 2 with the name of the chair of the House Finance Committee as the sponsor. Okay? But the as introduced one is the governor's budget. Okay? All right. Then the House works on it, right? First in the Finance Committee. Well, first of all, in the House. Meanwhile, while the governor's working, the House Ways and Means Committee is also working. So the House Ways and Means Committee starts beginning of January and figures out how much each tax is going to collect over the next 2 years. They come up with an estimate, right? And so the key number that gets sent to House Finance is how much are we getting, right? So that's how much can be spent. And so we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of that in a moment. But the key starting point for the House is the House Ways and Means Committee. So if you become a member of that, you're going to be working right on first thing in January. You're going to be very busy January to mid-February because that's your time to work on that. So the House Finance Committee, meanwhile, is very busy January, February, and March. So January to mid-February, they're working, just hearing from agencies, right? The agencies come in and talk to them about what's going on, what are their new priorities, what's changed. Maybe federal law has changed and that affects the budget, things like that. But once they get the governor's budget mid-February, that's when the House Finance Committee is super busy. There could be 6 days a week or something like that. And they're meeting with agencies, they're coming up with changes to the budget. They've got the House Ways and Means Committee numbers, so they figure out, okay, from that big number, how much the chair of House Finance mostly figures out how much is going to go to HHS and how much is going to go to safety and how much is going to go here and so on, spreads it out. And then the individual sections of House Finance Committee is divided into 3 parts. It has Division 3 is HHS budget. That's over 40% of the total, okay? Division 2 is other big stuff. Education, Department of Transportation, Department of Safety, I think they also do lottery, all right, and maybe a couple of little things. And then Division 1 is everything else, all right? So all the corrections is the big one, the judiciary, the Attorney General's office, the Secretary of State's office, on and on. You know, they may have 50 different items. Division 1, just as an aside, Division 1 is the one division I have yet to be on. It's the one I'm going to ask for this session. I would like that part, that experience. Anyways, so those divisions will meet with the individual agencies, figure out whether they like what the governor did in those particular cases, or do they want changes, and so on. Okay, and so they'll be voting on hundreds of individual little amendments to House Bill 1 and House Bill 2 in their committees, right? So in their little Division 1, Division 2, Division 3 committees, they'll be figuring that out. Typically, the Finance Committee has 25 members, a chair and 8 each in the divisions, but it could be, you know, could vary depending on our numbers. Okay. Now, besides, one of the key documents in this whole process is something called the surplus statement. The surplus statement is where the balance between income and outgo is listed. All right, so when you're looking at documents, you really don't have to read House Bill 1 and House Bill 2 to figure out how much overall, you know, what's the big picture of what we're spending or what we're getting. You read the surplus statement, which is 2 or 3 pages, and that tells you revenues so much, adjustments so much, you know, left over from last year so much, spending in the first year this much, spending in the second year that much, and it all balances, okay? And so I'll talk to you where these documents are. All right. Well, I'll talk to you where these documents are in a minute, but the surplus statement is, if you're really interested in what's going on, that's the thing to watch. It's prepared by the legislative budget assistant. That's the staff for the finance committees. And they keep it on their website, and they update it frequently so you know where things are and so on. So it's a very important document. Now, all the budget I've been talking about is the operating budget. There's another budget called the capital budget. So the capital budget is for big stuff, where we're going to borrow money, right? For example, there's a new legislative parking garage. Maybe that'll be in the capital budget, right? So it's for big things that we're going to use over time, bridges, new buildings, stuff like that. And that goes in the capital budget, which is House Bill 25, and that is handled by the Public Works Committee. So if you get onto the Public Works Committee, you're like a mini finance committee, right? The treasurer tells you how much we are able to borrow, and then you go through all the requests from all the agencies and decide how much to borrow and use that way, right? So it's like working on the mortgage, sort of. Traditionally, the Public Works Committee has been the least partisan committee in the legislature. I don't know why, but almost all their votes are unanimous in that. Carol wants to say something.
One reason they're unanimous is that they always spend. They listen to the treasurer who says you can borrow X, and they spend X, possibly X minus 1. But they spend every penny they can get.
But also, if you have a bill that happens to be heard by that committee, you're either going to get it passed unanimously or ITL unanimous. Anyway, that's the capital budget. Okay. All right, let's go on. So the budget is important. If we don't get one, if it doesn't pass, right, and what happens? Well, they do what's called a continuing resolution, where you continue the previous year's budget into the current year. The problem is there's all kinds of problems, because there are things that are time sensitive, right? There's things that were only meant to be spent last year because maybe they're one-time things or whatever, or the amount of revenue assumed last year is nothing like the revenue assumed this year for certain things. The number of kids in school is different, so therefore spending on education should be different. There's all kinds of reasons why you really want a current budget and not to go with last year's budget. So it's extremely important that we pass a budget. Now, for political reasons, we have a divided legislature this year, especially, so the Senate has a 1-seat majority for Republicans. The House is a 3-seat majority for Republicans. It's teeny tiny. There's going to be recounts. We don't know what's going to happen from that. And we don't even necessarily know we're going to get a Republican speaker. So that's how close it is. It depends on how many people show up on the day where we vote for speaker, right? So any given day in the House, there could be a majority of Republicans or a majority of Democrats sitting in those seats. And that's going to determine what passes that day and what doesn't. And so it's extremely important if you have to be in your seat. If you're a legislator, you want to be in your seat on organization day when we pick a speaker and on the day we vote on the budget, right? Because if we're one short on voting on our budget, guess whose budget we're going to get, right? We're going to get the Democrats' budget. So it's very important. And in the past, we've had enough little bit of flexibility that we've been able to put some things that are sort of non-budget items in the budget. Because House Bill 2 is a law, changes law, we can put whatever law changes we want into House Bill 2. For example, last session, the 24-week abortion ban, right? That was in House Bill 2. Well, I'm thinking that because the margin of error here is so tiny, we need every single vote. We can't put things in the budget that some guy in the corner says, I can't vote for that, right? So it has to be 100% financial. It's got to be really about the money, because there's very few people who say, well, if the Department of Safety gets 100 million, I'm not voting for it. 99 is okay. You know what I mean? It's like, there's very few people who are going to be like that, right? So I think this term, we're going to have a very clean budget. None of this fooling around stuff. Not that I wouldn't like it. You know what I mean? I'd love to have parental rights and emergency powers and all those kind of things in the budget. But I just don't think the voters gave us enough people to do that kind of stuff. So, anyways, secondly, last time was a relatively easy budget because of COVID. The feds were showering the state with money, right? Money was flowing in, and to some extent, expenses weren't quite so high. Now, what do we got? I think the feds are not going to, they're going to turn off the spigot to some extent, and also inflation, right? So we're going to have problems. And so this is not going to be an easy budget, I don't think. I think we're going to be making cuts, and it's going to be a hard year. All right. So we will try in this budget to hang on to the tax cuts that are automatic. So they cut the interest and they put in place law to eliminate the interest and dividends tax, for example. But the way they did it was they did it so that none of the pain happened in their budget, right? So it was like in the last month of the last quarter, they started the ramp down, all right? All right, well, what that means is in the budget that's coming up, we got a 2 years worth of ramp down, right? So there's less money coming from that. Yeah. I'm happy, but so we'll try to keep all that kind of program tax cuts. I really don't know. It's going to depend, but I don't know to what extent we can do more, right? It's going to be tough enough doing that, but we'll see. And voters gave us gridlock. So the voters, I don't know if they knew that that's what they were going to be doing to us, but they gave us a very divided legislature, both in the Senate and in the House, and it's going to be difficult. All right. Oh, and I should say specifically about the Senate. Unfortunately, the Senate the other problem with the legislature right now is a lack of experience. All right? So we lost the top 2 members, one retired and one didn't get elected, of House Ways and Means, right? We lost a couple of top members, the former chair and some others in House Finance, all right? And in the Senate, they have no Republican senators who have ever been on finance, all right? So they're all new, you know, and that's very difficult, right? They had very experienced people there. Chuck Morse was the chair of Senate Finance for years, John Reagan, Bob Gaida, etc. So Gary Daniels, of course, he was chair for a couple of terms. So all those people are gone. So the Senate is in big trouble, all right? Now, hopefully they'll get some of those people to help consult with them or whatever, but the experience level in the legislature has dropped. And so that's another thing that's going to make this a difficult year. All right, so if you want more information, here's some websites. Transparent NH is a very light little website that's where those pie charts came from. It's got little bits of information. You can also, though, look up specific spending. I think there you can kind of see all the checks that the state writes, so you can really, you know, say, who are they giving money to? All right. Revenue focus. So this is a document. I have a copy here. This is a document that comes out monthly, and that's the website for it. But it's where the Department of Revenue tells you how are we doing, you know, taxes coming in compared to expectations, all right? So this one is for October, and the good news on this one is that the business taxes, our plan was to receive in October 18.4 million, and they actually received 40.8, right? So that's big, right? 22, double, okay? So that's good for business taxes. Well, what other taxes? Let's see here. Tobacco tax. Tobacco tax is 1.2 million lower than expected. They expected 20 million, they got 19. You know, that sort of thing. So some of that is timing. I think in this business tax it's probably timing. Another big one, real estate transfer tax. Our real estate market is super hot, right? And so, we got 21.8 million in the month for real estate transfer tax. We only expected 16, so that's a big improvement. Okay. One other thing I wanted to talk about related to that. Oh, and then the legislative budget assistant. So this website, this little website I gave you there. Currently, there's one file in it. You can subtract 2 from those numbers, go back to 2022 and 2023, and you'll see 50 documents, okay? So this is the website where the current budget, the one we're going to be working on, it accumulates all its documents, right? So you can see everything that we see is there. Okay. Now, there is a little bit of good news, and I thought I had it on the chart, but maybe I didn't. Did I? Oh yeah. Yeah, it looks like I missed a page 3. Look at page 3. I didn't talk about page 3. I must have pushed the button twice. Yeah. What? Yeah. Okay. Well, anyways, look at page 3. The only thing I want to talk about. So we've got challenges and we've got some advantages, right? So the challenges we know about. So the pension. Let's talk about the pension debt. If the official word on the pension debt is that we're about $7 billion in the hole, right? To be where we should be at this point to cover our pensions, we should have $7 billion. But the good news is we have a 30-year mortgage on that $7 billion, and we're putting in an extra $300 million a year or whatever it is, and we're going to get it paid off. And everything's okay, right? The problem is that I think that 300 million is based on unrealistic assumptions. So some of the assumptions include that the size of government is growing, so that the number of employees we're going to get that are paying into the pension system should be increasing. Well, guess what? It's not growing, it's decreasing, right? Woo! So that's good news, right? But we have this debt issue now, right? So the debt is a problem. So it's a problem. That's my. And I was hoping that we would be able to do something about it, but with this size, these numbers we can't. Inflation and energy, right? So everything costs more. Energy is going to be super expensive. Now that's not a big part. These are not big parts of the state budget. The main thing of the state budget is salaries. That's the main thing we spend on. But our constituents are going to be hurting. And so we're going to be under pressure to increase the amount we put into energy programs for the poor, right? Things like that, right? So that's going to be a new expense, more greater expense than it usually is. All right. New Hampshire is limited by workers. We don't have enough workers, and that means our growth is limited, right? So all of our growth assumptions, like again and with pensions, right? We're assuming that our revenues are growing. Those are going to be tamped down by the fact that we don't have enough people. And then the political ones I talked about, divided legislature, inexperienced in the Senate. Now, we have two pieces of good news, right? The good news is, as bad as things are in New Hampshire, they're worse everywhere else, okay? So we're in better shape, economy-wise and so on, financially, than Maine and Massachusetts and Vermont and everywhere else, right? So by comparison, we're not that bad, okay? And the other piece of good news is Massachusetts just shot themselves in the foot. All right, so they did what Maryland did years ago, right? They put in a millionaire's tax, and they raised their income tax 80% on people on income over $1 million, and they count as income. You sell your house for $1.5 million and you bought it for $200,000. That's income, So capital gains in Massachusetts counts as income. So guess what? Those people are moving. And some will go to Florida, but hopefully some will come here. So I would tend to expect, if you're in the real estate business, that high-end real estate, the Bedfords and the Lakes regions and those Portsmouths, those are going to do well, right? That's what I would think, because of Massachusetts doing that. So we're going to get more wealthy people into the state, okay? Which generally is a good thing. So okay, questions? Greg?
Dan, why don't you explain what the LBA is, what they do?
Yes, okay, so the legislative budget assistant has two main jobs. One is audits, and so they work for the legislature. They do not work for the governor, okay? And they do audits of all the departments, and they actually have a lot of people. I don't know if it's 30 people or something, but they regularly do audits, both performance audits and financial audits. So they look for fraud and problems not following the law and all that sort of stuff, and we get reports and so on. So on your particular committee, right, depending on what committee you're on, you probably regulate a certain section of the executive, right? So if you were on resources, I guess you're dealing with DES a lot, things like that, right? And parks, okay? So you should be reading the financial and performance audits, especially the performance audits, of those particular departments, right, when they come out. And they do it every 5 years or 10 years or something like that. So that's important, because there's a lot of, and what's really frustrating is when you look at those performance audits, you frequently will see things like, well, 10 years ago in the performance audit, this was a problem. It's still a problem, nobody ever did anything about it, okay? So that's the kind of stuff you gotta watch out for. That's the LBA. Now, the LBA also is the staff to the House and Senate Finance and Ways and Means Committees to assemble the budget. So when the committee members want to change the budget, they tell their LBA person, make me an amendment to House Bill 1 and 2, and they do that, right? So that's where, you know, they deal with tons of paperwork. They come up with all these amendments, and they make sure that the grand totals stay balanced. So they write the surplus statement, okay? And they make sure everything comes out right in the end. They're very, very useful, okay? All right, question, yeah.
Yeah, my question is,
Diane, yeah.
thank you for taking my question. My question is, for new state reps, if they are planning on filing a bill that has a fiscal impact and a financial note, then it should be filed this first year, correct? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think you can, thank you for the question. So I'll repeat the question. So her question was, if you file a bill that has financial impact, you should do it the first year. And I would say generally yes, if it's a big thing, right? If it's significant. Because what happens is, if the House passes such a bill, right, then the Finance Committee will know it and will frequently put a copy of that bill into House Bill 2. And they'll take whatever the financial impact is and put it in the grand totals, right? So if you have a bill that spends money or saves money or whatever, hopefully saves, I would do try for that. That'll get merged into the budget. Now, the Senate is perfectly free to, and sometimes we might even just table the bill, right? You might pass the bill and then table it because it's in the budget, so therefore, you know, the Senate's going to see it. But yes, generally speaking, that's what, you know, if it's anything substantial, you're right, I think the first year makes more sense. Now, one thing I should talk about briefly is there's another committee called the Fiscal Committee. So the budget is a fixed thing every 2 years, right? It's a point in time. We create a budget, but what happens is things go wrong, right? And there are changes and circumstances change. And the federal government might, you know, after we do the budget, 6 months later, they might say, hey, we want to send you another billion. And so we have another committee called the Fiscal Committee, which is joint between the House and the Senate, and they are authorized to make changes in the budget, right? So if something changes, they can deal with it. So it's not just, you know, if it's in the budget, it's always going to be that way, and there's no changes and all that. There are ways to make changes. And also, if revenue is short, the governor is authorized to spend less where he wants to, right? So that's how, it's the governor's job to make sure that we don't run out of money, right? So if revenues happen to be less than expected in the budget, the governor starts laying off people or making changes or whatever. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah, back here.
So could you go through, just for an example, what the process would look like for a budget created by the Finance Committee Division 3, where does HHS tell them, hey, we want to spend X, and they say, the committee says, okay, HHS, we'll give you X minus 20 million. Like, how does that work?
Right. So he asked for a little more detail about the budgeting. So first of all, it's in much lower level than just a total number for HHS. There's an amount for Medicaid. There's an amount for dental plans. There's an amount for nursing homes. There's an amount for the veterans home. There's an amount for, you know, all those kind of things. And within each one, there's personnel costs, there's equipment costs, there's benefits, there's stuff like that. So the total HHS budget must be 100 pages or something like that of spreadsheet, of in House Bill 1. It's a lot. And so the Division 3 will go page by page by page through that. And they'll ask questions, and the HHS person who deals with the budget will be in front of them, and they'll ask questions, and they say, you know, and in those pages it says how much you spent last year and how much you expect to spend this year, right? So they'll say, well, why is this going up 20%? You know, what's going on there? That kind of thing, you know. So, and especially when they have experience, then they get to know where are the problem areas and you know, where are the things that they should be asking about. So yeah, there's a lot of detail, and they can make changes to that low level of detail. Now, it is also possible, and it sometimes happens, that the legislature just thinks HHS is spending too much, but I don't want to go to this account, that account, that account, and figure it out. So they can put a footnote at the end of House Bill 1, which says the total amount that HHS can spend is 4% less than the total you've seen earlier in this bill. Okay? So they can do stuff like that. All right? I mean, just anything you can think of, you can do. Right? So, so that's the way. And that's happened sometimes. What? Yeah, well, or the commissioner of HHS is authorized to make changes, right? You know, that's the way it would be worded. Yes. Okay. Other question? Are we doing?
Time's up.
My time is up. Okay, here's Matt.
Thank you, Dan. So I'm going to vote for the budget unless Mark Allegro calls me and tells me not to. Okay, we got Ross Colony. He's going to come up and talk about marijuana and other AFP priorities.
Everyone's favorite topic, spicy lettuce. So 2 years ago when I was here, it was snowing outside, so that's an improvement. Unfortunately, the majority in the House is not an improvement. So just a quick recap for AFP on the election side. We endorsed 42 candidates in the general election, 36 won. Pending a couple recounts, so fingers crossed on those. But congrats, I see a lot of the folks in the room, so congrats to all of you. So obviously, we were anticipating something a little different coming out of the election. We had some big plans for big legislation, but obviously that changes with the 207 and 197 House. Really, what we're going to be focused on probably 203. Sorry.
That's right. Wishful thinking.
Wishful thinking, yes. So obviously, you know, we're probably the number one thing we'll be focused on is really defending a lot of the priorities that have been passed over the past few years. So making sure that EFAs stay in place, making sure that business taxes don't increase, making sure that no egregiously bad things come out of the House. So that will probably be our number one priority, is defending those things. You reps will probably be getting a lot of calls from us on Tuesday nights before session to make sure that you actually show up for session and vote the correct way. So expect that. Keep your phones on. And show up for session, please. I'm sure Jason would appreciate it. Some of the other things that we think we can make some progress on, we're hoping that we can still reduce the BET another 0.5%. We hope that we can accelerate the phase out of the interest and dividends tax. So we think, you know, we can still push for those things. And hopefully get those through the House or into the budget. Another item is, so I'll say some of the sponsors of these bills that are already out there. So direct payment for healthcare facilities, sponsored by Mark McLean. Going to give that another crack. Obviously, all of these things will be pretty difficult to get through the House with the majority we have, but we're going to take a crack at them nonetheless. Glenn Cordelli will have a bill to increase the cap on education freedom accounts, whether increase or phase out. Alicia Lekis has it as well. So, okay, so talk to Alicia. But we do hope to increase that. Obviously, again, will be difficult when we'll be having to defend all the Democrat bills that will be trying to just completely eliminate the program. I believe Kevin Verville back there has a plan to put his bill in again for a local option EFA, something that long term, we're going to continue to support, and eventually we'll get that done for sure. I know Kevin's determined to get it done. So, land court, so trying to address some of the property rights issues and the housing issues. That's sponsored by Bob Lynn. That was a bill that happened the previous term as well. So hoping to clear up some of the backlog in people that are able to build and provide more housing supply. To Dan's point, we have a lot of millionaires moving here from Massachusetts, so we got to find them houses, I guess. Data privacy. So this is one we've tried a couple years now, sponsored by Representative Keith Earth, who I don't believe is here. Really making sure that the government can't just warrantlessly collect data on you and violate your privacy rights. We think that's super, super important to be able to back up Granite Stater's constitutional right to privacy. There's currently nothing backing that up. The government's violating it on a daily basis, and we want to provide some power in statute to push back against what they're doing. So, providing that privacy right. Renewable Energy Portfolio Fund rebate. I think Michael Vos is planning on putting that again. Obviously there's going to be a huge energy issue going throughout the winter. I think we all, if you've received the bill lately, I still have my heat off. Hopefully this weather keeps up. We're going to need some sort of relief. We think that's a reasonable thing to do, is just rebate the money back to ratepayers and provide that additional relief, because that one-time payment of emergency funds cannot be used, obviously, in perpetuity. We have to have some other relief in statute. So hopefully Michael's bill will make it through the House as well. College free speech, will be giving another crack at that. Obviously, going to be a very close margin in the Education Committee in the House, and close margin in the full House. But Democrats last time on the Education Committee did say that it was an issue that they thought was reasonable and wanted to find a pathway to doing it. So we took a lot of the feedback from the committee from 2 years ago, adapted it into a much simpler bill, and hopefully that will provide that protection for students on public campuses. It only affects public university students, allowing them to have their free speech rights, essentially. So it'll be a watered down version, but we want to take that step to protect the kids on public school university campuses. Licensure reform. Diane Power is like the table of AFP endorsed candidates here. Diane Power has a couple bills she's putting in. I think she already put them in. Niche beauty, so removing the licensure requirement for somebody that wants to open. I always use the example of blow bars. I had to look this up like everybody else. Blow dry bars, whatever. Maybe there's another bill for that. Blow dry bars, so removing the licensure requirement for that, and also providing universal recognition for out-of-state cosmetology licenses. It's something we want. There was basically no opposition for the recognition bill. In fact, Great Clips supported it. I believe Supercuts also supported it. But the Senate still killed it for some reason. So we're very optimistic that both of those bills will have a much easier path this year. I believe they're both bipartisan bills, so hopefully we'll get some Democrats to support it as well. We'd like to see very broad licensure reform. You know, we want to see, our ideal is seeing across the board universal recognition of out-of-state licenses. This is something that Arizona has done. There is no reason why New Hampshire can't accept people that want to come here. They're licensed to work in their state. They want to come here and work. We should make it as absolutely simple as possible for them to do so. Just sign a little registration form with the state, and you're good to go. Obviously, you know, Carol can attest to this. Any broad licensure reform, we have run into major issues. Just every single license board comes out in mass and says that the sky is going to fall if we do this. So I know Dan said we don't want a lot of policy in HB2, but if we do want to put something in HB2, we would highly recommend that as an option, since that would hopefully avoid a lot of the issues if it's a standalone bill of just everybody coming out of the woodwork to oppose it. So on to some of the other items, the criminal justice items. We're scaling back a lot of what we're focusing on top priorities for criminal justice. Just we're going to have to balance a lot of other things that I've just listed, but we're definitely going to make a big push for forfeiture reform. So in the state of New Hampshire, we have banned civil asset forfeiture. There's two issues with that, and that was Dan McGuire's bill, so props for Dan.
Yeah!
Two issues with the current system. So one, state and local law enforcement are going around state law by using the federal Department of Justice's equitable sharing program. So basically they make it a federal case and they get about 80% of the money. So they don't need a conviction. The other issue with that is you go through your criminal case proceeds through criminal court. If you're acquitted, you still have to go to civil court currently to get your assets back. So in civil court, you do not, it's a different presumption for one thing, and two, you do not get representation. So if you cannot afford a lawyer, or if the lawyer's fees exceed what you even get in return, it makes absolutely no sense to actually proceed. So most cases end in default, which means that the state just, there's no resolution and you don't get your property back. The Department of Justice here claims they don't do defaults very much. I'm a little skeptical of that, but nonetheless, it's the principle of it that you should, if you are acquitted, you should get your assets returned to you immediately. So our proposal does both those things. It closes the loophole on equitable sharing, which has an exception. So law enforcement can still join in what's called joint task forces, and they can work with cross-state partners, and the ban on that does not apply. So it's just using the equitable sharing program, not joint task forces, and it puts that civil process within the criminal process. So as soon as the criminal proceedings are done, the same judge, the same lawyers represent you, and it should take about 5 minutes, quick decision on the case against the property once the case against the person is concluded. So hopefully that's one, again, that gets cross-party support. We're very hopeful that it usually breezes through the House on a voice vote. The Senate's been an issue, but now we've been working with the Attorney General's office, and we think that in the court system to find a solution where they're not going to come out and oppose it in the Senate, So we're hopeful that we'll get it through there as well. And the last item, cannabis, spicy lettuce. So obviously there's been many proposals over the years. The New Hampshire House was one of the first legislative bodies to actually pass a cannabis legalization bill. It's hit roadblocks in the Senate, roadblocks with the governor, many different governors over the years. So what we've really been focusing on through the summer as a coalition is finding the middle ground, finding a proposal everybody can get behind, and from our perspective, doesn't grow government, it reduces government. So we believe we found the best proposal yet, and what it does is it has home grow included, so you'd be able to grow at home. Fully expect that to get stripped out along the process. As Carol, we always support Carol's bill, which legalizes with home grow, and the Senate just refuses to talk about home grow. But it does a lot of other good things. So it does have a cannabis control commission. That was just something, that was a debate between all of the partners. And we came to the conclusion that putting the Department of Agriculture in charge, or the Liquor Commission in charge, actually was not a better solution than establishing a new standalone commission that has the expertise in the subject area. So that commission has to be approved. All the members have to be approved by the Executive Council. They also have a check on them with an advisory board, so people that work in the industry that can give the commission real-time updates on how the rollout's going in the industry. Both of those things, and this is something that we push for, both the commission and the advisory board are subject to 5-year reviews. So every 5 years they have to go before the legislature and prove that what they're doing, one, is effective, that they have the right amount of power, and if they should even continue to exist. So every 5 years, the legislature could revisit the fact that they shouldn't exist in the future. That was, from my perspective, I don't think, eventually this industry should be mature enough where you don't need that oversight. You should get rid of it. It's really for the initial rollout of a new industry. So that was an important point for us. Let's see. Getting to some of the items I think everybody is probably interested in, taxes. We would love to see 0 taxes. I would, taxation is theft, nobody likes it. However, to get the votes needed and to really get all sides behind it, we're going to need some sort of tax component when it comes to retail sales. So we tried to find the best way to do that. So this bill does not create a new tax. It expands the meals and rentals tax to be meals, rooms, and cannabis. So it'd be an 8.5% tax at the retail level. We think that one, tying it to meals and rooms, one, not a new tax. 2, it would be very, very difficult to increase that tax. I can tell you people on the left want to see it at like 20%. They want as much money as possible. So putting it at 8.5% tied to this tax, if you raise it, you're going to be raising the tax on restaurants, on hotels, on Airbnb, etc. So, we think the incentives are there to actually lower it. You're expanding the tax base, so hopefully the incentive is to lower that over time, not raise it. So like I said, it's at the retail level. There's no cultivator tax. All the regulations are really centered at the cultivator level, and the manufacturing level. So there's a robust testing requirement so that consumers are protected. You know exactly what's in the product that you're getting. You know that it's safe to consume, and same thing at the manufacturing levels, having oversight there. I'll get to that. Excuse me. Sir, Daniel?
Just quick question. I understood from the past that there was an element of the government wanting this in the liquor store, so basically you guys wouldn't do that, this bill would.
No, it would not. That bill was so the question was, there was a proposal to put it in the liquor stores. That was the only cannabis legalization bill that I'm aware of that we didn't support. It was, we tried to work with now Senator-elect Abbas, on that. We appreciated him, going from being a prohibitionist to now trying to make a positive impact. And I certainly liked his intent. He wanted to have zero taxes. I mean, that was his focus. The issue is, there was many issues. One, it made, recriminalized edibles. So that actually increased penalties for possessing edibles. It increased penalties for driving while operating. We already have penalties for driving while impaired. We don't need additional penalties. And the biggest thing was, you have a sole buyer of a product, but you have private cultivation and manufacturing. So my concern with that was, you have somebody starts up a $1 million grow operation. They have one buyer. The buyer doesn't want the whole product. What happens? I'd be concerned for those folks.
Just to clarify, I wasn't trying to support the idea. I'm just concerned that that's why it failed in the past, because maybe the Senate wants it, and I didn't know whether that was addressed.
I would say the Senate definitely doesn't want it. The vote was pretty clear last year. I can't remember exactly what it was, but the closest bill was Carroll's. I think it was a 2-vote margin. Yeah. Some people flaked at the end because they knew it was going to fail, but it was closer for Carroll. So I think that idea has been resoundingly defeated. So I'm happy about that. This bill again takes some lessons from that, the low tax structure, and what I haven't talked about yet is where the money goes. So to Dan's earlier point, we have an issue with pensions. Our idea is pot for pensions. We're 70, as it stands right now, obviously the legislative committees will have a lot to say about this, especially Ways and Means, but we'll definitely push them to keep this in there. 70% of all revenue generated will go to pay off the pension system. When that's paid off,
Support that idea.
I got the boomer support, so that's something. So once that's paid off, it then goes towards paying off, trying to, as much as possible, zero out the statewide property tax. So that's 70% of the revenue generated. Going down the line, I can sort of list here where the rest of the money goes. 10% goes to a new substance abuse and recovery trust fund. 10% towards helping farmers, veterans, impacted communities in the cannabis industry. 5% to municipalities that have at least one cannabis facility in the town. So the only towns that can benefit are those who do not opt out. So it's not an opt-in like Massachusetts has. Massachusetts, the town has to vote to say you can come here. In this bill, they would have to vote. The town would have to hold a vote to say that any cannabis facility is not allowed in this town. The incentive is it shouldn't be treated like any other industry, obviously there's regulations. You can't have it next to a school. You can't, zoning still applies, and they can still have say over all of that. But they can't just preemptively, towns can't say it's not allowed without holding a vote. And they can't get the money if they do hold that vote and they say no. Only those that are contributing to the benefit should get it. And then 5% towards really training for law enforcement to handle impaired driving. That's something we think we need to put in there. It's one of the concerns constantly that we get from opponents. Bonnie, you've had your.
I was just wondering, so what is the biggest differences between the way that the bill was before, where it would basically give it to the alcohol commission, and the way it is now? Like, it'd still be run by the government, would it still be like a monopoly run by the government, no private businesses or anything like that?
No, it's totally private. So there would be no government ownership of any of the stores, any of the cultivation units, any of the manufacturing units. Be totally privately owned. One of our big, we have 3 big points at AFP: low tax, and protecting consumers, so having reasonable protections for consumers, testing, making sure that we have that, and then 3, really ensuring that barriers to entry into the industry are as low as possible. A lot of states you may have seen, New York, Massachusetts, Illinois, the usual cast of characters, they continue, so their approach is we'll make special funds for people that are impacted by previous convictions or something like that. We don't think that's a good idea. One, it just makes the licensing more expensive. You're giving special treatment to one area of people instead of the others. You're picking winners and losers. Not a good idea. It has been a disaster in New York City, I can tell you that. So our solution is the licensing fees are very low, very low. I think Daryl from New Hampshire Cannabis Association, by the way, is here. He's been hugely helpful in this whole process. This is something that we as a coalition wanted. I think the licensing fees to get it initially can't be more than like $1,000. So we want just regular legislators to be able to enter the industry if they want to, and obviously having the oversight would be, you're not selling to minors, you're protecting underage folks from getting it. Since I always say we have very similar goals to law enforcement, ironically. Our solutions just actually work. So, we want to reduce access for minors to be able to get the product. We want to protect consumers. You don't want fentanyl in cannabis, these stories that pop up. The solution there is legalizing cannabis in a system like this that has oversight, but allows the market to grow and react as necessary. So we're really hopeful that this bill would make by far the best system in the country. It's not even close. We took a lot of lessons from other states. The licensing is mainly based off Maine. They actually did a good job with keeping low barriers to entry. They have high taxes though and some other issues. So my goal, I grew up in New Hampshire, it's the live free or die state. It is absolutely embarrassing that we continue to arrest people every single year for this. And we see the stores. We see these stores, I think 35 minutes from here, there's a store in Massachusetts. There's stores in Vermont now. It's actually 420 in Tingsboro, at 420 Middlesex Road in Tingsboro. There you go. I've seen state rep plates there, so. So this is, we want to end this farce, this charade, and we want to make New Hampshire the most competitive in the country, really. And that's why it's really hard to judge like how much revenue we get from it. We expect around $100 million initially, but again, it's hard to predict because it is federally illegal to travel over state lines. But if you ever go to Maine, Massachusetts, Vermont, you can see the amount of out-of-state cars that are in the parking lot. It's almost completely New Hampshire state plates. It's ridiculous. It needs to end. And hopefully this will be the year. We hope that the House just, again, similar to forfeiture, passes any cannabis bill that comes their way. So really the Senate is the biggest hurdle. So call your senators and call the governor and get them to change their position on this. It's one of the few things we think that can actually get done in the next couple years.
It's on the Democratic Party platform.
It's on the Democratic Party platform. You know, to be fair to them, I'm usually not, but their caucus, besides Luke Alessandro, I believe is completely in support now. So it's a lot of Republicans that are the issue. But that gets to the point. I do need a prime sponsor for this bill, since the prime sponsor that we had lined up lost his election. So if any of the reps in the room, I was looking at Erica Leon, I don't know where she went, but Erica, if any of you are interested in sponsoring this, it would be great to have a solid Republican prime sponsor. There's lots of co-sponsors that are lined up, but definitely need someone that cares about the issue to really run with this. But you will have a lot of help behind you, us, New Hampshire Cannabis. The ACLU is also in support of this, among some other groups. So, yes, I don't want to get in between you and food.
You might find the senator. It's a lot easier to pass the Senate first.
Yes. Keith Murphy. Yeah.
Yeah, I've thought about it. I know Keith, you know, is on board. That was a big improvement from Kavanaugh. So, you know, it's definitely worth
Also
considering.
Howard or Tim Lyon.
Yeah, and even Daryl. I think Daryl Abbas is open to it as well. So, thank you. It's a good point. It's a good point. Yes.
Question on the licenses. So is the license available like an unlimited number of them, or are there only a certain amount that will be available, like taxi medallions in some states?
So the question was, are there limits on licenses? No, there are not. There is a limit on how many licenses an individual can own.
Okay.
So that's something that, and I believe there is an expiration date on that. It's only for a certain amount of time until that goes away. And the main point of that was really giving New Hampshire residents the first crack at it, making sure that you know, Altria and some of these large companies don't come in and just buy up all the licenses. Shouldn't be a huge problem because there's not a limit on them, but we want to make sure that you know, a big company doesn't come in, dominate, and knock out all the little guys that have been waiting for their.
I know some people that grow over in Maine, and they said they're having a problem with California grow operations moving in there, monopolizing the licenses.
It's been a problem in a lot of states. Massachusetts is similar. You know, so that's sort of our solution to try to address that issue. So I believe, Daryl, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's 3 licenses per, so you can have 3 retail, 3 cultivator, 3 manufacturer, but no more.
And then no more than, I think, 20 or 30% in any other entity.
Yeah,
But
so
there
it's
is
a state.
gray area there still.
Yeah.
Back to the civil asset forfeiture. You mentioned there's a carve out for joint task force. Could you explain why?
It wouldn't pass.
Otherwise.
Yeah, it wouldn't pass. You know, we did try this. We've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, trying this bill. We started with just blanket ban on working with the feds, essentially. unfortunately, that just, I couldn't even get some of the liberal Democrats to support it. So, because it would create a big issue, is the thing. If you get rid of joint task forces, there are many right here in Manchester. They have one that they work with, cross-state agencies for drug task forces. So politically, we had to, we have to carve that out to get it passed.
A question. So in criminology, if hemp is not included, why you talk about cannabis and not marijuana? Can you explain the difference?
The difference between cannabis and marijuana?
No, hemp. I think if hemp is part of cannabis, why you? But I think your law is not covering hemp. Why you calling it cannabis?
So I'm pretty sure we already addressed hemp in New Hampshire.
Well, there may be one theory we did.
Yeah, because you can buy Delta whatever. Our focus is just on cannabis. That's the biggest part of the market. There is, in this, it allows for some oversight of the Delta strains of hemp. Just because if you're having a commission oversee cannabis, because it's an intoxicant, then having them oversee a hemp derivative that's also intoxicating that's just fair game. I think just equally treating them the same. So that would address some of the concerns from law enforcement about these Delta products that you can buy at gas stations. I'm done.
All right, thank you, Ross. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Representative-elects come up in 3 minutes, propose the bills that they're working on, and the goal is to afterwards have people collaborate on that. Before we do that, Alicia, I guess, is pointing at the pizza. We're gonna have everyone come up and get some of the refreshments. We have pizza out here and some other things, and then we'll get everyone back together. Thank you.
Oh, excellent! Congratulations!
Now the hard part is starting.
Yeah.